Hey, this is BRAINWAVEZ, and today I'm going to show you how to arrange a modern bass music track. This whole project file, as usual, is available on my Patreon along with many others, so feel free to check the link in the description if you want to get it, and let's get started. For this, I'm going to use my new single called Troublemaker. So I have the Ableton project open for this track, and the first thing that you're going to notice is that I have locators set every 8 bars. And that's because I believe that writing in 8-bar blocks, it's super beneficial to having an engaging arrangement for your tracks. That's because every 8 bars you want to jump to a different section. It doesn't have to be completely different from the previous one, but you at least want to be adding some extra elements or changing some elements to keep the flow going and to keep things interesting for the audience. If we start breaking down this track, you're gonna notice that at the beginning I don't have any drums in the first 8 bars, and then in the second 8 bars I start adding some drums. Basically what I'm doing in the second 8 bars is building up on the elements that I have in the previous one, in the previous section. So all of this continues to be an intro, but I'm adding like different elements every 8 bars. So let's check that out. So, as you noticed, the second 8 bars I start introducing some drums. Subtle drums is nothing crazy. And then I start introducing the vocals.
Pull up on the flag. Pull up on the flag.
So I think it's pretty useful to think in terms of energy. Since this is the intro, I don't want that much energy going on. I want to start like building tension to then release it in the drop. So you gotta think in terms of like tension and release. So what I'm doing here is starting to build tension little by little, but there is not much energy. Like all the energy, it's gonna happen in the drop basically. And I'm gonna start building that energy in the build-up section. I'm also taking in consideration that either myself or other DJs are gonna play this track out, and so I want to have a DJ friendly structure. And what I mean by having a DJ friendly structure is just leaving enough space before the drop for DJs to mix your track in. Nowadays, DJs can mix quite fast, but in most cases, I try to have either 24 or 32 bars before a drop, just to give enough time for a DJ to mix things in. You could have like longer than 32 bars for sure before a drop, or shorter than 32 bars before a drop. In my case, the shortest I would go would be like 8 bars of intro, followed by 8 bars of build up, and then the drop happening at the bar 17. But yeah, in general terms, I try to have a structure similar to this. So the drop coming at the bar 33 or at the bar 25. So the key takeaway with building a good structure, a good arrangement, is adding movement every 8 bars. If you don't do anything different after 8 bars, people are gonna lose interest and it's not gonna be an engaging structure. So you could see that I added some drums and some stuff in here, and then if I jump to the next 8 bars, even more elements start to appear, some more drums, some more stuff in the synths and also in the fills. I'm just keeping things engaging for the audience and for myself as well. one tip that I would give you, and this might not work for everyone, but this works very well for me, is if you don't know what to do for your next section, like let's say that you have this and you don't have anything else after that, just copy and paste it. Just copy and paste it to the next 8 bars, and just without overthinking it, start like adding stuff that you think that could work. Don't be too judgmental, just start like adding stuff, and most likely you will find something cool to, you know, add to the second 8 bars. Sometimes it's better just to have too much and then take back than not having enough to begin with. Even if maybe you don't feel like this section is complete, to avoid getting stuck in an 8 bar loop, just jump to the next section anyways and start like building that section, and you might find some things that could also work for the previous section, and you like start building your structure kind of in that way. That may not work for everybody. As I was mentioning, some people prefer to nail an 8 bar section first, and once they have completely finished it, jump to the next one. But in my case, sometimes I get too caught up into one section and I maybe lose a lot of time just thinking of that one section. And what I've done to avoid that is just jump into the next one, even if I feel like this one may still be lacking, just because afterwards I'm still able to jump back and like add stuff. Also, something very useful that you could do if you don't know what to add next into your arrangement, or if you just don't know how to structure your track in a way that makes sense, is adding a reference track. Just something in the same BPM that you're working on. So for example, I'm just gonna grab one of my tracks, make sure that it's aligned with your grid, and then you can start like listening to the reference that you have. You can start like noticing the structure, and with the locators you can just write down the structure of the reference track, and then you can mimic that same structure yourself. So in this case, the structure for the reference is pretty similar to the structure of this one. So intro is in here, build up, then drop. But in this case, the breakdown comes a little bit earlier. So if I was with a new project and I didn't know what to do next, I would just go in here and it's like, okay, this is the breakdown. So I would just rename this breakdown and then, you know, continue. So build up would be here. And then the drop in this section. So that's a pretty easy way to just stop guessing like what your structure should be like, because you have like a reference of something that you like and that you know it works. You can also modify it at some point if you want, but I feel like it's a great starting point for you to get the guesswork out. Now, to flow in between sections, like for example, going into a intro to a build and going like from a drop to a breakdown, it can be sometimes challenging because maybe the transitions that you're doing are not the smoothest ones, and maybe they don't sound like a cohesive track. So some things that you could do is adding like transitional effects in between sections and drum fills and vocals and stuff like that. So let me just show you how I go from the drop to the breakdown in this track. So I'm just gonna play the last part of the drop. So some things to notice is with the drums, at the very end of the arrangement, I just have like my snare, but I took out like the hi-hats and everything else. I'm just decreasing the energy to let people know that breakdown is coming. Then I'm introducing like transitional effects, for example, like this sweep up. And then it goes into like a sweep down. a white noise, and I have some things from the breakdown that I'm introducing slowly in the drop at the very end, like these things in here. Same with this in here. I start introducing the elements of the breakdown in the drop at the very end, just to let them know that this is coming. Even if it's subtle, the brain kind of hears it and knows that something else is coming. Also in here, something else that I did was I did an automation with the delay on this one, and then I froze that and I flatten it, and I use it and I put it on another track called delay out. And it's like the tail of that delay happening. I actually have the delay still in here. I just put it in there. Then I click freeze. And then I have this big audio. And then I can just click flatten. And now this part in here is what it's interesting to me, so I just put that in another channel and I raise the volume a lot, and that's what I'm using to create that effect of continuity. So just think of ways to connect your previous section with your next section. That's how transitions should be approached, I feel like. Just how can I connect these two sections together? Talking about connecting sections, something that you should really pay a lot of attention is the build up and then the drop. They should really flow well together to make the drop really rewarding. So the build up is all about building tension, and the drop is about releasing that tension. For my build up, I have a ton of stuff just pitching up and speeding up. I have a filter version of the lead from the drop playing in the build up. And that just creates a lot of familiarity and a lot of anticipation. And also I'm looping the pre-drop vocal. And a cool thing that you can do in the middle of your build-ups is adding something like KHS tape stop plugin. There's also a Max for Live to do this, so you don't have to buy this plugin, but this basically just create a tape stop effect. And that little pause in there, it just adds a ton of tension, you know. So that's a cool trick that I like to use, and it just helps a lot. Now let's talk about call and response patterns, because that's such a big thing, not only for electronic music but for music in general of all genres. Having a call and response pattern, it's super important, and it just creates a way more engaging arrangement. So we can actually see it from the intro with this track. This would be the call, and the response would be. So it's just like a conversation. One synth says something and the other one responds basically, and that just creates a cool engaging pattern. And also I have that same thing going throughout the drop, and it's way more drastic. So the call would be this melody, and then the response would be the whoops that happen in this section. So let's just take a closer listen to that. then it repeats itself with a little bit of variations. So, you know, the call, it's like a melody, and the response is more of a sound design switch up. And that just keeps things engaging. Then the third phrase of the drop, I change the response. So just a quick note, normally drops are like, for this type of genre, they normally are 16 bars, sometimes 32 bars. And in this case, I'm just making my drop to be 24 bars, which is also something that you see, but is not as common, but is completely fine if you know how to pull it off. Just a quick note that most of the time your drop is going to be like 16 or 32, but in this case it's 24. Call and response is really, really important, and you can see that I have like mini call and response patterns in between like the main patterns, like for example the drum fills in between, and like some of the bass fills in between the sections. So like that is like a little bit of a response to this, and then that's like a little bit of a response to that. So I kind of have like patterns of call and response inside like the main call and response patterns, if that makes sense, which once again make things like really interesting to listen at, because it strikes a good balance in between predictability and variation. So to give you a little bit of context of the way that I build my tracks, I normally start with the drop idea and then I build backwards. So this was the case for this track. I started with this and then I started making the build up and I went backwards until I reached what I felt was the beginning of the arrangement. Once I get to that point, I just copy and paste the arrangement from, you know, the first half into the second half, and I start like making decisions of like, okay, what do I change now? How do I make the second half different? Do I want it to be the exact same structure as in the previous one? Should I make it shorter? Should I make it longer? And what variations can I create? But honestly, once you have your first half, I feel like second half comes easier, just because you have like a template already created for yourself. That's way less daunting than having like a white canvas. All right, so let's just recap what we have learned. Build your tracks in sections of 8 bars. Think in terms of having a DJ friendly structure, meaning having enough time for the DJ to mix your track in before the drop. Then make sure that you add movement every 8 bars, either by changing melodies, adding stuff, taking stuff out. Also have transitional elements in between sections when necessary. Always think in terms of call and response and tension and release, having contrast in between sections and keeping things engaging with the call and response. If you're stuck at any point of your song, just copy and paste the structure from the previous section and start adding to it. Try not to overthink it. It's all gonna be fine at the end of the day. So I hope this video has been helpful, guys. Thank you very much for watching. And just for you to know, I'm giving this project file of this track to all my Patreon members, which I feel it's a great one to study. It has over 100 channels and there is a lot of sound design in here, a lot of layers, a lot of things that you can learn, either for things like arrangement as we have seen here, but also sound design, layering, mix down, mastering. So I think it's a great opportunity. If you guys want to catch the project file, is available on my Patreon. Also, I'm doing one-on-one music production lessons, link in the description. Thank you very much for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I hope I see you around.
Pull up on the side.